I had the pleasure of entertaining Yellow Technology up here yesterday. They're looking at doing some new tie lines for me. Now, the reason I use a company like Yellow Technology is I can't even change a light bulb, let alone the thought of wiring up a studio just brings me out in hives. There is, however, someone who I'm very close to who is excellent at building studios and has had to, over the years, build a hell of a lot of them. And it's a great honour that after a degree of cajoling, he's agreed to take over this channel for an episode. Take it away, Paul.
Christian once told me that he thought that I had set up more studios than anybody else he knew. So I thought that one way for me to tell you a little bit about myself today was through the medium of recording studios, large and small. I'm going to call this first era the Cassette Era. So this is where it all began. I managed to get into Worcester Cathedral Choir, which was an intensive musical education at a young age, singing usually for 2.5 hours a day, everything from Palestrina all the way up to kind of 20th century stuff, some of the stuff more tuneful, some of the stuff more atonal, very complex, some of it. We were lucky to be able to tour the world, and we made quite a lot of recordings, and this is where I got my first kind of taste of the music industry, or the recorded music industry, shall we say. So my first experience of looking at a mobile studio was during a TV broadcast. And subsequent to that, I would ask, whenever we were doing an album recording or radio broadcast, I would try and see if I could get into the kind of mobile truck or the control room just to have a look at the tapes whirring around and all of the gear, and just to see if I could work out what was going on. So this was the era when computers started to become more affordable, and there was a home computer market that began. So I'm going to call this the Commodore Era. I had a VIC-20 and later on Commodore 64. My first ever sequencer, I guess. Really insanely complicated sequencing software that was available in those days. So you used to have to sometimes type in numbers to make music happen. And the amazing SID chip, the legendary chip, which had 4 voices. So another trick was trying to make it sound like it had more than 4 voices. So this was an era learning about sequencing music and how to try and make music using a computer. Around this stage I became a student, started at Bristol University where I studied aeronautical engineering, managed to get them to let me take a paper on music in amongst all of that stuff. Now these were the days when taking pictures was a lot more complicated than it is now. You had to buy some film, wind it into the camera, you had to take it to a shop to have it developed. Somebody else would see your pictures before you did. You got them back with stickers on them saying this picture's crap, it's really blurry, and so on and so on. So there is no pictorial evidence of this, so this is a dramatic reconstruction. So as you can see, I had a second-hand Roland digital piano, I had a second-hand sound canvas, and I had a second-hand Atari 520 ST, so I thought I was really the bee's knees. I had my kind of cool studio going there. And this was the rig that I used to get my first paid job. I was paid £50 to write the idents for the Bristol Student Video Magazine. Now, I don't believe the video magazine ever progressed beyond 1 issue. I think it was so insanely complicated for them to put together that they kind of gave up. But nevertheless, it gave me the opportunity to go to a 16-track studio, a real professional recording studio, and to have my tracks, my little things mixed, add a bit of live stuff onto them, and you really kind of get a taste for studio life. Sadly, that little studio is not there anymore. A lot of those 16-track studios disappeared with the advent of the kind of technology that we can use now to record at home, in your bedroom, all of that kind of stuff. However, it was a really valuable first experience in a real recording studio for me. Hey guys. So after uni, I moved to London, spent 3 nights a week cleaning vegetable cabinets out in a huge supermarket in Camden Town, and 3 days during the week demonstrating pianos at Harrods, tramped the streets of Soho trying to get anybody interested in my little composition show reel, and I managed to get a job as a musical dog's body at a little music production company in Carnaby Street in Soho. That was an incredibly valuable learning experience again, really intensive musical education. Thank you, Mike and Toby. So this was a period of working for real, in a real recording studio, getting paid to write music for a huge number of different clients, And in this studio I was working with reel-to-reel tape, 24-track tape, using an MPC, Akai MPC 60 as my main sequencer. Even if I was doing full orchestra stuff, it was all done on that, what is essentially a drum machine, but a really nice, quick, fast, intuitive little sequencer. While I was working here, my boss was obsessed with the Eurovision Song Contest. He absolutely loved the Eurovision. We got through to the finals, the Great British Song Contest this particular year, for the feeder into the Eurovision. We didn't win it, but I did appear on Top of the Pops in an extremely ill-advised haircut and outfit. And in one of those funny kind of coincidences and a kind of weird quirk of fate, who should be appearing on Top of the Pops the same night that I was recording, but BT, playing his amazing song Loving You More. And I was a huge fan of BT's, and so it was really a real thrill for me to be able to see him record his song. He played the same piano that I had just played earlier on. He looked much cooler than I did. Luckily there was no sign of Jimmy Savile. Subsequent to this I left the music production company. I went to LA for a month in '99, got a place on the ASCAP film scoring workshop where I studied, learned all kinds of things about the business, about orchestration, studio, working with musicians, did some incredible workshops, had a great mentor in Richard Bellis. And so this is the group for them that year. You might recognise as our mate Trevor Morris is there. There's Emanuele Fratiani, who you probably know, those of you who are into video games, from the VG Live, Video Games Live conductor, orchestrator. Funnily enough, another weird coincidence, Eric Whittaker ended up doing the workshop the year after I did. I wrote a cue for 101 Dalmatians, recorded it on this stage, the Warner Brothers lot. Again, an amazing experience, another new studio to add to my checklist. I had to conduct the cue, which was a really interesting experience. So I came back from LA and started to get into record production at this stage. Did a few productions, the biggest of which was an album project for East West Records. Spent a year and a half working on the album, really proud of it. And as it was due to be released, the management of the record label changed, the name changed and everything, and they dropped all of their artists, I think, apart from Blazing Squad. So that kind of made me fall a little bit out of love with the record industry. We got to mix the record at Salm Hook End, which was an amazing experience. A beautiful old mansion with an attached studio, belonged to Trevor Horn at the time. So as I obviously can't go anywhere without trying to build my own little recording studio, I did manage to build another recording studio here in a vocal booth. We did replace a couple of vocals while we were on the mix, so that was, it had a purpose. But it was an amazing experience. Sadly now the building has fallen into disrepair. I think it's being renovated now, so it's not going to totally go to rack and ruin. But this was my bedroom, and as you can see, it's kind of it's a bit different from when I stayed in it. It was a bit of a weird house. We did have there were some strange noises and happenings while we were staying there. We had Brad Gilderman mixing the record, multiple Grammy Award-winning, incredible mix engineer, and we were mastering the album in New York. So, very excited by this. I was going to see a mastering studio for the first time, proper mastering studio. And this being the DAT era, left to get the plane, walked out the studio having said goodbye to all my compadres. They came running down the road after me with a pile of DAT tapes. I'd actually forgotten the album. But this was before the era when you could just kind of pop a "you send it," or we transfer the whole thing. So luckily they caught up with me. Took the album to New York, had a great experience mastering with Tom Coyne at Sterling Sound. Another great studio, but sadly, as I say, album didn't see the light of day. This was also the era of extremely dodgy poses in studios for me, no comment necessary. And this brings us neatly to the Mainframe Era. So I'd abandoned the world of record production and embraced the world of TV drama. And for me, this meant lots of orchestral sample libraries and thus lots of computers. So it was around this time when I started my collection. I had just 3 or 4 to start with. And around this time, I moved out of this recording studio in Roundhouse when the building was sold to be converted into flats. I moved back to a home studio for the first time since the mid-90s in a converted garage. Doesn't look too promising at the moment, but with a little imagination. So by this point, I'd acquired a frankly insane number of computers. And so I managed to get hold of 3 very tall racks from BT, a fire sale BT had, not the EDM artist British Telecom. I had actually, I think, 9 PCs and 4 Macs at this stage. We're still using removable SCSI drives and all kinds of arcane stuff like that. It was in this room that we did our first ever production run of Spitfire DVDs. And that was the bespoke chamber strings, round about the time that Giga Studio was no more, so we had to convert the whole thing over to Contact. I also started composing music for one of the teams on The Apprentice UK for the advertising task. And this led to an interesting kind of experience of seeing some more of the studios in Soho that are set up just for ad agencies. And in fact, there's a couple of ad agencies that have their own studios. So this was in Spirit Sound, working with Ghazal, who was lovely. And does anybody recognise the blonde person at the back? Here's an example of an exceptionally small studio. This one, laptop, mini keys, mini speaker. Another high adrenaline situation thanks to Talkback TV, trying to write a Pirates of the Caribbean style track to order with no advance notice while being filmed by 3 camera crews. And to round up the Apprentice section, a slightly nicer studio in Saatchi & Saatchi. I'm the shadowy figure conducting the Celebrity Girls team while they sing their jingle. Another high adrenaline. Well, if you're going to cock it up, why not cock it up in front of 8 million viewers? We then moved again, which allowed me to break out of the converted garage vibe and into an actual bedroom studio. I'm not sure if that's a step forwards or backwards. Yet another round of PC upgrading allowed me to shrink the count from 13 to 5. And at this property, our neighbours kept trying to steal our cat. Now, getting all my pictures together for this little chat, I came across this one. Nothing to do with studios. Who would ever think this was a good idea? Anyway, this takes us to our next studio, which is the Sunset Marquee. And this was not the actual studio in the Sunset Marquee, although we would go there a couple of years later. This is a studio that we built in a suite at the Sunset Marquee. And this was for the first ever Spitfire LA roadshow. This was a private and by appointment thing that we kind of started showing some of the stuff that we could do. We had our first commercial library to show, which was the percussion. But we also wanted to show composers what we were doing with the bespoke stuff as well. From around this time, you can see that we'd started recording some commercial sounds. And here is an early version of the Spitfire production spreadsheet. Very much a kind of approach to production planning. And also around about now, from Christian's studio in Soho, we commissioned our first ever DVD pressing with what we thought was the biggest and safest company in the UK. And we commissioned them to do an Apple box, because who doesn't love an Apple box? So we wanted to present the percussion in an Apple box, 3 DVDs, that was going to look minty. Unfortunately, as you can see, they didn't manage to line up any of the graphics correctly, the boxes didn't fit into each other, and then while we were trying to get this all sorted out, they promptly went bankrupt, leaving Christian's flat filled with 5,000 boxes and DVDs. We literally had to pay to get them taken away. They were entirely useless. Luckily for us, in terms of shipping physical goods, a volcano exploded in Iceland, which caused all of the flight patterns to go haywire, all of the physical delivery patterns to go haywire, and so we were forced to look for another solution, which turned out to be delivery via the internet. It was around this time that my wife and I decided that we would go and live somewhere sunny for a few years to give the kids a little bit of a different experience of life and a different kind of culture. And it was between Spain and LA. When we got given our green cards, we decided LA was the place to go. And so here I was building another recording studio in another converted garage. Once I'd put up a few panels, this one actually sounded pretty good. It was while we were living in LA that we started working with hands-on samples. So I managed to check off another major studio from my bucket list, which was the Fox scoring stage. We went to Fox to record Jason Bonham, who needs no introduction, but unfortunately is a real no-fun guy, as you can see from this picture. So this bass drum is the legendary bass drum commissioned by Alfred Newman for the 20th Century Fox theme. Eventually we'd got used to the sunshine, Spitfire was really starting to expand, so we were drawn back to the UK to build a bass for Spitfire. I was finally able to build a real recording studio that would befit my status as a successful media composer. Not this one. This was a home studio, and you can see here that I've graduated from garage to shed. Here it is a few months later. Getting nicer, but still not the one I'm really talking about, which is, of course, this one, which you may recognise, which Nick and Paul built for me at Tileyard, thank you guys, and has now become Spitfire's main control room. So now I'm back to the converted garage / toolshed, or at least I was briefly. That studio has had to be struck again as the building is being demolished, and I'm beginning the very slow process of building a bespoke recording studio there over the next 2 or 3 years. It's going to be a very slow process. I will of course document this for your amusement. So this brings us right up to date with my current studio, and I'm back in a bedroom, which kind of brings us full circle. So that's a little bit about me, a bit of my story, my life in studios. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for listening.